Great. Uh, hey everyone, welcome to this presentation. I am Momen. Today, on behalf of my co-authors, Tanu, Dr. Sang, and Carlos, who are also in, part of this work, I'll be presenting uh, this work titled OtherTube. This is a system paper designed basically to facilitate content discovery and reflection by exchanging YouTube recommendations with the stranger, basically what the title says. The motivation behind this work is the issue of filter bubble. Aristotle introduced this idea of filter bubble, which is typically created by algorithms by producing output that are consistent with the user's existing interest and filtering out content that are inconsistent with users' interest or their past activities. Here are a couple of figures that illustrate how YouTube's typical algorithm work. Here you will see that YouTube considers users' past activities in terms of search and watch histories for the purpose of generating candidates for what to show on their homepage recommendations. Consequently, the resulting recommendation created by this filtering algorithm often look like recycled items. This is a quote by one of our participants in this study, which further illustrates the problem users have where it is pretty hard to get past the recycled content produced by YouTube's filtering algorithms. Sometimes they even have to go incognito to act like a different person to find new content. Even when these platforms introduce features to diversify content recommendations, their feature may not provide the adequate amount of diversity user might be expecting. For example, recently YouTube introduced this feature called New to You, which is supposed to introduce some kind of diversity in terms of the content they're showing. Here is a figure of what a typical YouTube homepage recommendation is. And here is other example when this, I'm sorry. Here is another figure that's showing recommendations when this new to you feature is selected. From a cursory look, you will see that there are a bunch of suggestions that are pretty similar in both sides. So potentially these are coming from a previous set of topics suggested by the YouTube's algorithm. So to help improve awareness on this filter bubble, we kind of use the concept of showing alternate perspectives from past HCI literature in our work. Some prior works used to showing alternative viewpoints, particularly to balance political news consumption for users. Examples of such work include Sean Munson's balancer widget, which generally summarizes users' news consumption over a week by the political leaning and kind of try to nudge people into reading news coming from sources from opposing political leaning. Another example of this kind of work can be this tool called POP, which augments news tweets with similar stories, but coming from opposing leaning sources, similar to the balancer widget. This also kind of tries to nudge people into reading news tweets, but coming from alternate political leaning sources. So results of this kind of past studies have shown some improvements in terms of users' news consumption from different political leaning. We kind of extend this idea of showing alternate viewpoint, but in a general scenario, other than the political one that like past studies typically has done. So we do so by allowing users to exchange their YouTube recommendations at the top of their YouTube homepage with strangers with this tool called OtherTube. The name OtherTube kind of comes from tube as in television and other as in someone else. So essentially suggesting watching content from someone else's point of view. I will start with the demo here on how the tool works first. So after users install this extension or plugin, they have to fill out their profile. OtherTube won't work if they don't do that. Here we can see user is filling out some of the details such as something related to their demography. They can also choose their avatar by choosing different kind of skin hair, clothing type, and they can also fill out an about me section detailing something about their interest, anything in kind of free form style here. So after users create their profile, they can reload their YouTube home and it will show an embedded page, which basically shows a stranger's YouTube recommendation, like shown in here. In this embedded part, users have the option to interact through 3 buttons. One is to switch between different strangers. Then there's another button to even look at different strangers, but looking at different session from the same stranger, as well as like pin a user if they want to get back to this person later. So kind of to recap, as shown in this figure, OtherTube embeds strangers recommendation feed at the top of user's homepage. Then right below, we can see the recommendation user received from YouTube, which is collected as part of the exchange where other users get to see this user's recommendation. In OtherTube, user can interact and browse various users through 3 interaction buttons. Buttons to browse between users, buttons to browse different recommendations from the same user, and a button to kind of pin a user to come back to them later. So these buttons, other than these buttons, OtherTube also allows users to share their persona with some of these details. As shown previously, OtherTube allows users to create their persona with several features, like users can choose their demography, their avatar by changing their appearance, skin color, clothing, and different kinds of clothing materials. They can select their demography, but they're also welcome to not share anything by selecting don't share option. Finally, user also has a free form self-description bio that they can fill out. Apart from presenting their demography through the options provided, OtherTube also lets users to choose what videos they want to share or what they do not want to share. So here, by clicking on the icon on the bookmark bar, user can, on the OtherTube icon, user can see the recommendations collected during a session, and they can click on this trash icon to delete a video that they do not want to share. So using this tool, we investigated 3 kind of research questions. First, whether users are able to discover new content using this tool. Next, we check how different demographics interact with this tool. And kind of finally, what kind of reflection occurs from using this kind of tool. So to answer our research questions, we conducted a 10-day study deployment by inviting participants by advertising on Facebook. 41 participated in the study. Users were balanced in terms of in terms of gender, but there were some imbalance in terms of race and political affiliation. This is particularly interesting if you look at the users who signed up for the study initially versus the users who actually participated in the study. You will see that there is a significant difference between the number of African American users who signed up for the study versus who actually participated in the study. Unfortunately, it is currently unknown to us like why this discrepancy happened. So we can definitely speculate that it might have something to do with them being more skeptical about installing a browser extension. Basically, probably from some historical context, given that they face certain injustices in past experience, but this is just a speculation. We can definitely say what was the rationale behind this difference. During the 10-day study period, we asked users to fill out a daily survey questionnaire. This questionnaire contained a set of Likert scale and open-ended questions relating to our research questions. For example, whether something caught users' attention each day, or if they learned something from seeing others' recommendation. This learning could be about their own test, or it could be about the other users. Apart from these daily survey questions, we also logged users' interaction with the buttons in the OtherTube interface, as well as any interaction on clicking on videos and watching them. Furthermore, after the study, we interviewed a select few participants to elaborate on their responses in the daily survey questionnaire. So overall, we used this 3 stream of data to answer our research questions. In response to our first research question about content discovery, analyzing users' daily survey responses, we found that users found new interests from seeing OtherTube, like this particular user here who doesn't typically watch classical music, but saw this recommendation and watched that kind of content. We also found some users rediscovered some of their old interests, like this user finding content from this particular channel called Zero Punctuation, which they used to watch, and it kind of made them nostalgic. To answer our research questions too, we modeled users' interactions such as clicks on the OtherTube, on the buttons on OtherTube as a regression. To be specific, it was kind of mixed effect, negative binomial model, because it is a click kind of data, which is a count type of data. So we applied this regression against users' demographic variables and examining such interaction, we saw that people with lower age typically interacted more with the tool. We also saw that people with lower need for reflection also clicked more on their interaction buttons. However, it was interesting that the interaction decreased over time as the day passed on in the 10-day study period. We think that this could have something to do with the limited number of users we have in the system, which was 40 at the peak, and which could have resulted in limited variation in the recommendations over time. We also asked users why they may not have interacted with certain content, and in their responses, we found several rationale, including offensive nature of content, or inappropriate, or content not being helpful, which kind of made users not to interact with certain content. Overall, users interacted with 6% of all the collected videos in the system. when asked about users reflecting on themselves, we found some interesting results. Users realized what they liked and what they did not like. For example, this user seemed to understand that they typically like only short and fun videos compared to some of the long and serious content they were seeing on OtherTube recommendation. Some of the users also realized that their interest could be much unique and distinct compared to some of the recommendations they were seeing from OtherTube feeds. Some users also realized their similarities with other users by seeing recommendation on OtherTube. For example, this user was here surprised to see that they saw some of the videos from other person who were pretty similar in terms of their own taste in videos. In addition, some even further wanted to communicate with this type of users when they saw that there are some commonalities in interest between them, and they thought connecting with this kind of users could be useful for them. Unfortunately, OtherTube also had an undesirable effect where some users kind of felt superior in terms of their interest by watching recommendations from others. For example, some of them here thought others' interests might be kind of stupid or lacking diversity that they typically have in their own recommendation feed. So this is a kind of undesirable effect we saw by using this tool. When we asked about users what they learned about others, we saw that users showed several kind of learning about others. Some users realized that they could learn what was happening in someone else's life by just watching the recommendation feed. So it was kind of a window to what was happening or what certain users currently doing. Like, for example, take the example of someone watching do-it-yourself kind of video that could give an insight that someone is particularly interested in them in those kind of videos at a certain point in their life. There is also some other findings where users found general patterns like someone figuring out that older people might be watching health-related videos. Sometimes sometimes they found that this type of content generally did not reflect to their prior understanding of the stereotypical behavior that they might thought of certain demographic might be doing. For example, this user realized that some older personas, they might be watching videos about watching music videos coming from younger artists, which was not they typically thought that this kind of users might be watching. Some others also found this kind of stereotypes in terms of gender as well. For example, other user finding that a male user was watching some kind of video that they did not expect them to watch. Users also realized that how diverse content can be on YouTube compared to what they typically see every day on their own recommendation. Like one of the past comment here, past quote here, they saw how unique their own recommendations are, but at the same time, they realized that there were no common thread in the type of videos that they were seeing in strangers' recommendation. So that kind of made them realize the diversity of content that might be available on YouTube that they are not tapping into. Overall, to kind of summarize this work, we designed a system to exchange YouTube recommendations with the strangers, and we conducted a 10-day study which shows some promises in ways such exchange could help user like discover new content, interact with them, as well as reflect on their on their own interest, and reflect on interest on content consumption by others. Overall, there are several potential applications of this type of design on like heavily algorithmically curated systems like YouTube or Reddit. First, our system is a kind of use case to showing that using diversity could be useful in improving engagement on social sites without requiring to know about users' past histories. Second, in our interviews, we found that some of the participants mentioned potentially connecting to users they found similar to them. So that could be that could provide a pathway to design social functionality between strangers on sites like YouTube. But at the same time, there's also issues such as when it comes to deploying this kind of system for a large community like YouTube. For example, it could be hard for users to navigate large number of strangers. In those cases, several navigation features could be introduced. For example, we could show a subset to the users to make sure they are not getting overwhelmed, or we could provide filtering mechanism which could be useful for the users to find out the kind of content they're trying to find. So you can find further details in this paper. In the paper. Thank you all for listening to this presentation. Feel free to ask me any kind of questions or provide any kind of comments or feedback on the presentation. This is basically a mock-up of like what I'll be presenting on CHI, which is next month. So any kind of feedback on the presentation would be really helpful.